Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. All right, today's story is one of those headlines that make you wonder if someone spiked your coffee. Now, the son of a CIA deputy director was killed fighting for Russia in Ukraine. Meet Michael Alexander Gloss, 21-year-old, died on April 4th, 2024, somewhere in Eastern Europe, according to the family obituary. But let's be real, he wasn't backpacking through Prague, he was under contract with the Russian military deployed to frontline assault units near Soledar in Ukraine. Now, this wasn't just any American kid. Gloss's mother, Julian Galina, appointed Deputy Director for Digital Innovation at the CIA by Director William Burns under the former US administration. You literally could not invent a juicier propaganda gift from Moscow. Let's try and get ahead of it. So, how does a kid raised in a military family in Virginia end up dying for Putin's war? Well, it didn't happen overnight. Gloss was an inspiring young man, passionate about many activist ideals. He's seen in gender equality protests, environmental movements, anti-war causes, causes rooted in real concerns, injustice, inequality, conflict, the things that genuinely do demand attention. But somewhere along the line, that idealism curdled into a broad, seething anti-American and anti-Western sentiment. Now, that's when the vultures started circling. Because if you're looking for a market for anti-American rage, guess who's buying in bulk? Russian propaganda didn't have to trick Gloss, they just had to fan the flames. He started binging conspiracy videos, posting online Russian flags, Soviet symbols, Antifa content, and stuff produced by the more radical wing of the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, who hated the Ukrainian president for his Jewish ancestry. By 2023, the anger has metastasized. He wasn't just mad at America, he wanted to fight it. Gloss signed an official contract with the Russian military, and by December, he was in the mud with assault battalions marching into Ukraine. Now, here's the point. This wasn't just one misguided kid. This is what it looks like when anti-Western resentment, turbocharged by Russian disinformation, turns activism into weaponized betrayal. Russia didn't need to recruit Michael Gloss. They just had to open the door and wait for his anger to walk through. Now, Michael Gloss's story isn't an anomaly. It's a flashing warning sign, and if we don't take it seriously, the next casualty won't just be some far-off radical, it could be a whole generation of them. Now, when asked about the latest bombing of Kyiv, an attack Donald Trump diplomatically called unnecessary and badly timed, Sergey Lavrov gave his usual smooth performance. Now, according to the Kremlin's top diplomat, Russia only strikes military targets, and this time was no exception. True, a few rockets might have gotten slightly confused along the way, leaving 12 civilians dead and more than 100 wounded, and large parts of Kyiv looking like the set of a very dark disaster movie, but hey, who's counting? Now, this "trust us, we only hit bad guys" narrative has been a central feature of Russian disinformation from the very beginning of the war. Never mind that shopping malls, hospitals, playgrounds, and apartment blocks across Ukraine have had a habit of accidentally catching hypersonic missiles with surprising frequency. In the Kremlin's version of events, even a destroyed kindergarten was secretly harboring NATO-trained toddlers. Lavrov, the gentleman, then laid out Moscow's new reasonable position on peace talks, or at least something that sounded reasonable if you squint hard enough and drink a lot of vodka. Russia, he claimed, is open to certain compromises, though he thoughtfully declined to say what those compromises actually might be. So in diplomatic terms, this is roughly the equivalent of offering to negotiate the toppings of a pizza after you already ate it.
Однако украинцы несколько сот раз нарушили этот мораторий, который на словах Зеленский подписал. И я направил Марко Рубио и американской стране список этих нападений, он весьма красноречив.
On the topic of Crimea, Lavrov was crystal clear. Not up for discussion. In Moscow's eyes, Crimea is as Russian as vodka, Matryoshka stalls, and awkward shirtless horse riding photos. And the Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, well, that too is staying put under Russian management. A concept that sends chills down the spine of anyone who remembers how they managed Chernobyl. And when it comes to relations with the United States, Lavrov admitted, with all the charm of a man trying to sell a broken-down Lada, that Russia hadn't actually received any proposals to lift the sanctions against them yet. Still, he winked at Washington, hinting that there might still be business opportunities, perhaps in exporting used tanks or a slightly dented propaganda. In short, Moscow is ready to talk, ready to negotiate, just not about anything important. And if a few more civilian neighborhoods happen to mysteriously combust while military targets are hit, well, that's just diplomacy, Russian style. The Kremlin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, is still hard at work trying to sweet-talk Donald Trump. In this latest round of diplomatic pillow talk, Peskov cooed that there are many elements that really coincide with our position.
Понимаю, что вы нам ничего не расскажете ни о нюансах прежних переговоров, ни о нынешних, но вот сейчас поступают заявления президента США Трампа, очередные заявления президента США Трампа, теперь журналу Time, где он еще раз повторяет, что Крым останется в составе России в рамках сделки по урегулированию на Украине. Зеленский это понимает.
Работа продолжается. Значит, сейчас предварительно говорить о каких-то условиях, и работа эта не может вестись в публичном формате, она может быть только в дискретном формате.
И Трамп также заявляет, что в развязывании конфликта виноват Киев, и причиной стало то, что Украина начала говорить о вступлении в НАТО.
Я не являюсь пресс-секретарем Трампа, я являюсь пресс-секретарем Путина.
Но это ведь, мягко говоря, во многом совпадает с нашей позицией.
Есть много элементов, которые действительно совпадают с нашей позицией, да.
Of course, he quickly added that all this important work cannot possibly be done in public. Oh no, it must remain discreet, because nothing says trustworthy international negotiation like a bunch of secret charts between billionaires, oligarchs, and the President of the United States. Now, Peskov's message was clear. Let's keep the bromance alive, but behind closed doors, preferably with no witnesses, no recording devices, and absolutely no journalists unless they're from Russian state TV, in which case they'll bring the flowers and soft lighting. At this point, watching the Kremlin court Trump is starting to feel less like geopolitics and more like a very awkward episode of The Bachelor where every rose is dipped in oil money. Easter. A time for faith, renewal, and apparently weaponized stupidity. So, what's the latest? Well, Russian propaganda channels have been festing on a new fake. They're spreading a video that supposedly shows a military conscription raid by Ukraine's Territorial Recruitment and Social Support Center, storming into a church on Easter, terrifying poor innocent worshippers who, basket in hand, sprinted away like Putin's press secretary when someone mentions war crimes. Shocking? Outrageous? Except none of it is true.
Всі біжать Пасху їсти. Настоялися, голодні та втікають їсти Пасху.
And now, here's what actually happened. The video wasn't some brutal mobilization dragnet. It was filmed in a village in the Ivano-Frankivsk region, where running out of church after the Easter basket blessing is a local tradition. A charming, quirky, centuries-old belief that says whoever gets home first will have the most luck for the year. You know, culture, something Russian propagandists might have heard of if they weren't too busy trying to flatten every bit of it with ballistic missiles. And guess what? No recruitment officers, no military patrols, not even an angry deacon brandishing a clipboard. Just villagers, basket, and some good old-fashioned Easter cardio. So, why the fake? Why the dramatics? Well, this lie isn't random. It's precision engineered for the Western, or more specifically, the American audience. It's playing into the narrative floating around, echoed even by top politicians like Vice President Vance, that Ukraine is persecuting Christians and forcibly drafting civilians. You know, two birds, one greasy propaganda stone. Erode sympathy, sow division, and maybe peel off a few more American supporters at a crucial time in negotiations. Because if they can convince you that Ukraine is hunting Christians with conscription squads, suddenly sending aid doesn't feel so righteous. And that's exactly what the Kremlin wants. Well, nice try, Moscow. We see you. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, updated commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.